Hi, I'm Kylie Shinaut, and this is my Brown versus Board of Education presentation. We're going to start with a short summarization of the purpose of the Brown versus Board of Education case. So, Linda Brown, who's the daughter of Oliver Brown, the plaintiff of the case, was refused admission to her local elementary school that was closest to her house because of her race. She was forced to attend a segregated school that was farther away. So the issue that the Browns presented was that the Brown family, plus 12 other families that were dealing with the same situation, joined together to fight the Board of Education and to end segregated public educational systems so Black and white kids could attend school together. The ultimate decision for the first part of the case was a win on the Brown side of a 9-0 with a Supreme Court unanimous decision. But other problems occurred that caused two more trials, Brown 2 and Brown 3, to be established. Some dates to keep in mind as I go through this presentation is that in 1865 was when the Civil War ended, and it's also when the 13th Amendment was established to abolish slavery. In 1868 was the 14th Amendment was established to enforce the equal protection and rights to slaves. And then in 1870 was the 15th Amendment established to give Black males the right to vote. In 1879, Kansas law permitted, but did not require, districts to maintain separate elementary school facilities for both Black and white students. In 1896 was the Plessy and Ferguson trial. Then in 1954, 1955, and 1989 were the three separate Brown versus Board of Education trials. So we'll start with Plessy versus Ferguson because this is really important, and they pulled from this case to help with the Brown versus Board of Education case. This trial was where racial segregation laws did not violate the U.S. Constitution as long as the facilities for each of race schools were equal in quality. So when they said equal in quality, it meant like equal teachers, equal curricula, equal facilities, and equal transportation for both the Black and the white students for both their school districts. The separate but equal motto came from the Equal Protection Clause during the Plessy versus Ferguson case, which is part of the 14th Amendment, which we'll go over in the next slide. So the Equal Protection Clause was primarily needed to validate the equality provisions in the Civil Rights Act in 1866. This guaranteed all citizens would have the right to equal protection by law. This clause mandated that individuals in similar situations would be treated equally by law, regardless of them being Black or white or other races. The central question that Brown stated during the Brown versus Board of Education trial was that separate educational facilities were actually inherently unequal and violated this equal protection clause. But the court did have an emphasis with a 3-judge court that relied on this equal protection clause to go against Brown in his trial for that separate but equal motto, claiming that the public school district offered sufficiently equal quality of the teachers' curricula, facilities, and transportation to both the Black and the white schools. So if the separate facilities for separate races were equal, the state segregation did not violate this equal protection clause during the Brown versus Board of Education case. So the whole purpose of the Brown versus Board of Education case was to address that social inequality and unequal treatment between the Black students and the white students, since Oliver Brown's daughter was Black and she couldn't attend the white school that was closer to her house solely because she was Black. So the Browns' argument stated that to separate students from others that are of similar age and similar qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way that's unlikely ever to be undone. In regard to Black students being rejected to attend schools that are closest to their homes solely because of their race. So there were some segregation laws in Kansas, in Topeka to be exact, because this is where the Brown versus Board of Education case resided. Oliver and his daughter were fighting this segregation issue, where this law in 1879 was stated that the state of Kansas was permitted but not required to have their school districts maintain separate elementary school facilities for black and white students in the 12 different communities as long as their populations were over 15,000. But they were not required to. So the verdict of the first Brown versus Board of Education case was the unanimous 9-0 decision in favor of the Browns. But a statement from the case that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal and violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which partially overruled the Plessy versus Ferguson case. But trial continued, and they did agree with the Browns that the educational segregation did have a negative effect on African American children, and they were still applying that the white and African American schools did offer equal quality. So there was no method of actually ending the school segregation, so a second Brown 2 trial was needed. So the second trial, Brown 2 versus Board of Education, was implemented to request a relief concerning the task of desegregation in the public school system. So to actually put in the effort and the time and the need to actually desegregate the schools and not just talk about it. So the courts did delegate the task of carrying out the school desegregation to the district courts, with orders that this desegregation needed to occur with deliberate speed. But this caused problems. So the effects of this segregation on the public education because of the second trial. The supporters ended up very displeased with this decision to desegregate at a deliberate speed, that they called it too ambiguous to ensure that reasonable haste for compliance. And then other states, and especially the southern states, interpreted this as a legal justification for resisting, delaying, and avoiding significant integration for years and even decades before things actually took place. They used tactics such as closing school systems and using state money to finance segregated private schools only for the white children. And they had white-only private academies given to white families. But this actually left black children without an education at all. So this moved on and kept going for 25 years, where the black children ended up with no education, and the white children ended up in private academies and were given private education. So for many, many years, 25 years, the child who started the whole thing, Linda Brown, she started having her own children by the time she reopened the Brown case to have a third trial, Brown 3 versus the Board of Education. Her children were now going into the Kansas school districts. There was an open enrollment with these Kansas schools that actually worried a lot of the black students' parents for further segregation. So the case was reopened. So the trials for the Brown 3 versus Board of Education, there was a few separate trials for this one that stretched out for quite a few years. In 1989, there was a 3-judge panel that voted 2-1 that segregation did remain with respect to students and the staff, and equal quality was still initiated. So they didn't see any problem with the segregated schools at the moment. There was no issue. So then in 1993, the Supreme Court did deny the school district's request for seeking judicial review over segregation to have a lower court system help in with the segregation. So then in 1994, there was actually finally a plan that was approved and a bond that was issued to have additional magnet schools opened. A magnet school is a school system that offers specialized curriculum to attract students from different backgrounds, and a school system where all races are welcome. So this resulted in meeting court standards of racial balance by 1998. Then finally, in 1999, unified status was finally granted to the Topeka Unified School District, and desegregation was finally granted completely. So, based on what I've learned during the Brown versus Education trials and putting this presentation together, the harms that I believe would result in an employer if they were allowed to require its employees in their work facilities to be separated based off of their employees' races, I believe that hate crimes would pursue between the blacks and the whites in the workplace as well as outside of the workplace. And the company would probably be deemed unconstitutional and unethical, resulting with a class action lawsuit for discrimination against race, and probably will get shut down. These are my references that I used for the presentation, and I hope you like it. Thank you.